There is a reason this message arrived in your life at this exact moment, and it is not the reason you think. Somewhere inside you, beneath the doubt and the second-guessing and the exhausting habit of making yourself smaller, there is a certainty trying to be born. A knowing about who you are and what you are here to do. Something you love so deeply that pretending not to want it has been quietly breaking you. You did not stumble onto these words tonight. Something in you that is older and wiser than your doubt guided you here, because you have reached the exact point in your life where this message becomes necessary. Do not treat what follows as another video about confidence. Confidence is a surface word, a word for job interviews and posture. What you are about to hear goes far deeper than that. This is about the psychology of extreme self-belief, the kind of inner conviction that certain rare individuals carry like a force of nature, the kind that defies logic, defies social convention, and defies every voice that ever told them to be realistic. And here is the promise this message will keep before it ends. There is one psychological difference, a single internal alignment that separates people who move through the world with unshakable certainty from everyone else. Carl Jung spent decades mapping exactly what it is. Most people live and die without ever hearing it named. You are about to hear it named. But you cannot receive it in one piece, because before you can understand what creates absolute conviction, you first have to understand what has been blocking yours, and the answer to that is not what you expect. If you feel something stirring already, a strange recognition, a pressure behind the chest that says pay attention, then stay connected to this space, because messages like this one are not scheduled by an algorithm of chance. They arrive in seasons, at thresholds, at exactly the moments a soul is ready to hear them. Consider remaining close, so the next one finds you as precisely as this one did. Let this begin where your real life happens, not in your achievements, not in your plans. In the private moments no one else has ever seen. There have been nights, usually late, when the house has gone quiet and the noise of other people's expectations finally fades, and in that silence you have felt it. A version of your life so vivid it almost hurts. You standing fully in your purpose. You speaking without shrinking. You building the thing, saying the thing, becoming the thing. For a few seconds it feels less like imagination and more like memory, as if you were remembering forward. And then the doubt arrives, right on schedule, like a guard who heard a door open somewhere in the building, and the vision folds itself up and you tell yourself to be reasonable, and you go to sleep with an ache you cannot name. There was a moment maybe recently when you watched someone with half your depth and a fraction of your insight move through the world with total certainty. They spoke, and people listened. They decided and doors opened, and a quiet voice inside you asked a question you were almost ashamed of. Why them and not me? You told no one about that question, but it did not leave. It sank down into you, and it has been waiting there ever since. There is the way you soften your own sentences before you say them. The idea you present as just a thought, maybe, I could be wrong. The email you reread 5 times, sanding down every edge of authority until it cannot offend anyone, until it cannot claim anything. The apology that lives in your voice even when you have done nothing wrong. And there is the deepest one. The moment someone asked you what you really want from this life, and you felt the true answer rise up in your throat, enormous and burning and specific, and you swallowed it. You gave the small answer instead, the acceptable answer. And on the drive home, a part of you grieved and you did not know why. You know these moments. You have lived every one of them. And here is the first thing this message came to tell you. Those moments are not evidence of weakness. They are evidence of a specific psychological event that happened inside you, one that Jung understood with frightening clarity, one that can be reversed. You have been treating your self-doubt as a personality trait, as if you were simply born a doubter the way some people are born with brown eyes. You were not. No child arrives in this world doubting its right to exist loudly. Watch any small child and you will see raw, unbroken certainty, a being that has not yet learned to ask permission to want what it wants. Your doubt is not original equipment. It was installed. And in a few minutes, you are going to see exactly who installed it, and why, and what it has been guarding this entire time, because your doubt is not empty. It is standing in front of something. It is standing guard over the very thing you came here to find. But before that door opens, you need to understand the people on the other side of it, the ones who already live there. Think honestly about individuals with extreme self-belief, the genuine kind, not the loud performance of it. What you notice first is how strange their certainty looks from the outside. It is not arrogance, because arrogance needs an audience, and their conviction does not. It is not delusion, because delusion collapses under pressure, and their conviction hardens under pressure. They can be doubted by everyone in the room and remain untouched, not because they are ignoring the doubt, but because the doubt simply has nowhere to land on them. Rational logic says they should waver. They do not waver. Social convention says they should wait their turn. They do not wait. It is as if they are obeying instructions the rest of the world cannot hear. And that is exactly what they are doing. Jung had a name for those instructions. He called it vocation, and he did not mean a career. He meant something far more ancient and far more demanding. Vocation, in the way he understood it, is an inner voice, a summons that rises from the deepest layer of the psyche and addresses one person specifically, saying, in effect, this is yours to do, and no one else can do it. Jung observed that what separates truly individuated human beings from the crowd is precisely this. They heard the voice of their inner calling, and instead of negotiating with it, they obeyed it. He described personality itself as an act of courage, the courage to say yes to one's own law, one's own way, as if it were a private commandment written for a single soul. Sit with that for a moment, because it rearranges everything you were taught about confidence. The world told you that self-belief is something you construct. Affirmations in the mirror, posture, positive thinking, faking it until some unspecified day when you finally make it. Layer by layer, effort by effort, you were told to build conviction the way you build a wall, and it never fully worked, did it? Because the wall kept needing repair. One criticism, one failure, one bad week, and the bricks came down again. Here is the truth the wall builders never learn. Extreme self-belief is not manufactured by the ego. It is discovered. It is not a wall you build. It is a bell that was cast before you had words, hanging in the depths of you, waiting to be struck. The people who move through this world with unshakable conviction did not make their certainty. They found it, already whole, already theirs. And the reason their certainty cannot be argued away is that they did not arrive at it by argument. You cannot debate someone out of something they did not reason themselves into. Their conviction comes from a source deeper than reason. If a part of you just went quiet, if something in your chest recognized that bell, then pause and honor it. When you feel ready, type the words, "The voice is real" in the comments, as a way of telling your own depths that you are finally listening. That small act matters more than it appears to, because the inner calling strengthens in the exact measure that it is acknowledged. Now the harder question, the one your whole life has been circling. If that bell exists in you too, and it does, why have you never been able to hold on to its sound? Why does your certainty visit you in flashes at midnight and abandon you by morning? To answer that, you have to meet the force that has been standing between you and your own conviction since before you could name it. Jung called it the collective, the mass, the enormous gravitational field of everyone else. And he understood something about it that almost no one wants to hear. The collective does not merely fail to support your inner calling. The collective is structurally opposed to it. Not because people are evil, but because the psychology of a group runs on sameness. A group coheres by agreement, by predictability, by every member staying roughly the size the group expects. So when one individual begins to differentiate, begins to hear a private summons and take it seriously, The group experiences that person the way a body experiences a fever. Something in the field moves to bring the temperature back down. Be realistic. Who do you think you are? People like us don't do things like that. Stay humble, which so often secretly means stay small. You did not develop self-doubt because something is wrong with you. You developed self-doubt because you were trained by the field you grew up inside. Every time your young certainty made someone uncomfortable, every time your bigness embarrassed someone who had abandoned their own, every eye roll, every be careful, every who told you that you could, a small correction was written into you. Thousands of corrections, over years, until the collective no longer needed to silence you from the outside. It had installed a representative on the inside. That voice you hear before you speak up, the one that says, quiet, careful, shrink, that voice is not yours. It never was. It is the collective unconscious of every room you ever had to survive, speaking in your accent so you would mistake it for yourself. And this is where your story stops being a story about weakness and becomes a story about theft and about recovery. Because when those corrections came, your certainty did not die. Certainty of that kind cannot die. It can only be hidden. Jung mapped exactly where such exiled things go. He called that place the shadow. The vault of everything we were taught was unacceptable about ourselves. And here is what almost nobody understands about shadow work. The shadow does not only hold your darkness, it holds your disowned gold, your authority, your boldness, your right to take up space, your extreme self-belief. All of it was declared dangerous by the collective, and all of it was carried down into the dark for safekeeping. It is still there, intact, waiting. The reason you sometimes feel a power in you that frightens you slightly is that you are sensing it through the floor. Type the words "I answer the call" in the comments if you can feel the truth of that as a declaration that what was buried in you is about to be retrieved. Declarations like that are not decoration. They are how the conscious mind signals the unconscious that the exile is over. Now you may be thinking, if the certainty is already in me, why can I not simply reach down and take it? Why has wanting it never been enough? That question has a precise answer, and the answer is the single alignment this message promised you at the beginning. This is the difference between people with unshakable conviction and everyone else. Stay with what comes next, because most people abandon a message like this exactly here, right before the part that would have changed them. Jung taught that the psyche has two centers, and almost every human being lives their entire life knowing only one of them. The first is the ego. The ego is who you think you are, the small daylight self, the manager of appointments and opinions and fears. The second center is what Jung called the self, with a capital S, and it is something else entirely. The self is the true organizing center of the whole psyche, conscious and unconscious together, the totality of what you are and what you are becoming. If the ego is a single house, the self is the earth it is built on. If the ego is a wave, the self is the ocean underneath it. The self is where the bell hangs. The self is where the voice of vocation comes from. The self is the wellspring of that archetypal energy you have sensed in rare individuals, the energy that makes their certainty feel like weather instead of opinion. And between these two centers runs a connection, a living channel. Jungian psychology calls it the ego-self axis, and the entire mystery of extreme self-belief comes down to the condition of that single axis. When the axis is open, when the small daylight self stays aligned with the deep organizing center, certainty flows upward like water rising in a well. The ego does not have to generate conviction, because conviction is delivered to it from below, from a source that does not run dry, does not need applause, and cannot be argued with. That is why the truly convinced seem to obey instructions no one else can hear. They are not stronger than you. They are better connected than you. Their certainty is not a personal achievement, it is a transmission. And when the axis is blocked, you get the life you have been living. A daylight self cut off from its own depths, forced to manufacture confidence by hand, exhausting itself building walls that keep falling down. Not because you are broken, because you have been running a whole existence on the thin battery of the ego, while the power plant underneath you sits untouched. There is a name for that existence too. Jungian analysts call it the provisional life, the life lived in draft form, the life where everything real is postponed, where you are always preparing, always waiting for the mythical someday when you will finally be ready, qualified, permitted. The provisional life feels safe, but it is a slow theft, because a draft that is never published begins, after enough years, to rot. If you have felt that rot lately, that low hum of a life not fully claimed, understand it correctly. It is not depression at your failures. It is grief for your postponements. And grief of that kind is actually a magnificent sign, because you can only grieve a calling that is still alive. Here is where honesty requires a warning, and this warning is the difference between transformation and catastrophe. Because there is a counterfeit version of everything this message has described, and the counterfeit has destroyed people. Jung named it psychological inflation. It happens when the ego brushes against the enormous energy of the self, and instead of receiving it, tries to claim it. The small self touches the archetypal and declares, "This greatness is me. I am the source. I am chosen above others." You have seen inflated people, the guru who cannot be questioned, the visionary who treats every human being as furniture, the believer whose faith in themselves requires contempt for everyone else. That is not extreme self-belief. That is the ego wearing borrowed robes and calling itself a king, a small coin gold-plating itself and demanding to be treated as treasure. And you need to know the difference in your bones, so you never confuse the real thing with its imitation. True conviction, the kind that flows along a healthy ego-self axis, humbles you even as it empowers you, because you know the certainty moves through you rather than from you. It makes you more generous, not less. More able to honor other people's callings because you have finally honored your own. Inflation isolates. Vocation connects. Inflation needs an audience. Vocation needs only obedience. Inflation says I am greater than others. Vocation says something greater is asking for my hands. Hold on to that distinction, because the doubt in you will try to use the fear of arrogance as one last argument for staying small. Do not let it. Refusing your calling out of fear of inflation is not humility. It is just a more spiritual-sounding disobedience. Type the word rooted in the comments right now, as an anchor, a single word that tells your psyche you intend to carry great energy without being carried away by it. Now everything you have heard can come together, and you can finally see your own doubt for what it truly is. Your self-doubt is not your enemy, and it never was. Look at the pattern. The doubt does not attack your small ambitions. You can plan an ordinary weekend without a single tremor of resistance. The doubt reserves its violence for one target only, the thing that matters most, the calling, the vision that visits you at midnight. Doubt of that precision is not random noise. It is a plumb line. It hangs directly over the treasure. The intensity of the resistance you feel around your deepest desire is an exact measurement of how real that desire is. Nothing in the psyche fights that hard to guard an empty room. You feel behind, but you are not behind, because an oak is not late while it is still an acorn, and the whole tree is already present in the seed, complete, encoded, waiting only for conditions. You feel unqualified, but the calling itself is your qualification, because in Jung's understanding, the summons does not arrive in the wrong soul. The voice does not dial wrong numbers. If it addressed you, it meant you. And here is the reinterpretation that changes everything backward through your whole history. Every year of doubt was not wasted time. It was pressure. The same pressure that keeps ordinary carbon ordinary is the pressure that makes diamonds, and a conviction that has survived decades of suppression does not emerge fragile. It emerges dense. The people who frighten the world with their certainty in their 40s and 50s are so often the ones who were silenced in their childhoods, because certainty that has been tested by exile is certainty that can no longer be exiled. Your doubt did not destroy your self-belief. It concentrated it. When that lands, and you will know when it lands, type the words "I trust my inner calling" in the comments, exactly those words, to ground your conviction and honor the psychological evolution that is already underway in you. Because it is underway. That is not encouragement. That is observation. Something in you has already shifted, and the proof is sitting in front of you. A person whose axis was fully closed would not have watched this far. Could not have. The blocked ones click away in the first 90 seconds because the unconscious protects itself from messages it is not ready to metabolize. You are still here, which means the channel is already opening, which means you are already inside the beginning of what Jung called the individuation process, the slow, unstoppable emergence of the person you were always encoded to become. Individuation is not self-improvement. You are not renovating the house. You are letting the original architecture finally show through, the way a watermark shows through paper the moment you finally hold the page up to the light. So let this tell you what to watch for, because the opening of the ego-self axis announces itself in small, unmistakable signs, and recognizing them will matter in the weeks ahead. You will notice moments of spontaneous certainty, decisions arriving whole, without the usual committee of inner voices, and you will act on something before the doubt has time to convene. You will notice your need for permission quietly weakening, drafts sent with fewer rereadings, sentences ending without apology. The word may be disappearing from claims you know are true. You will notice synchronicity thickening around you, the meaningful coincidences Jung documented all his life, the right book falling open, the right stranger saying the right sentence, doors appearing in walls that were blank last month, because when the inner world aligns, the outer world begins to rhyme with it. And you will notice other people reacting to you differently before you have said a single word about any of this, because human beings read the axis in each other unconsciously, and a person coming into alignment walks into a room differently, and everyone feels it, and no one can explain it. Now close your eyes inwardly and let this be seen, because the psyche builds toward what it has already rehearsed. There is a morning coming, and it is closer than you believe, when you wake up and the arguing is simply over. No lightning, no ceremony, just a stillness where the war used to be. You move through that morning with a strange, quiet weight in your chest, and it takes you until noon to recognize what it is, because you have never carried it before. It is certainty. You sit down to the work that is yours, the real work, the postponed work, and your hands do not tremble, and the old voice starts its familiar sentence, "Who do you think you are?" And something in you answers, calmly, finally, "I know exactly who I am," and the voice has nothing left to say. Later that day, you speak in a room where you once would have shrunk, and you hear your own voice come out level and unhurried, taking up its full space, asking permission from no one, and the people in that room lean in, not because you performed power, but because you stopped performing at all. That evening you catch your reflection and you see it, the thing others will soon be asking you about, the settled eyes of a person who has stopped living provisionally. That morning is not a fantasy. In the deepest layer of you, where the self keeps its own calendar, that morning already exists. You are not building it. You are walking toward it, like a migratory bird that never needed the map explained, because the map was written into it before it hatched. Between now and then, your instructions are few, and they are quiet ones. Do not announce your transformation to the people who trained your smallness. New certainty is a seedling, and seedlings are not planted in the middle of the road. Do not chase proof, and do not demand that the calling justify itself in advance, because vocation reveals its logic only to those already walking. When the old doubt visits, and it will visit, do not fight it and do not obey it. Simply recognize the voice as the old representative of the old field. Thank it for its years of guarding and return to your work. Protect your mornings, Protect your silence. Trust the timing of your own becoming the way the acorn trusts the season. You do not need to force the oak. You only need to stop interrupting it. And understand, finally, why this message exists and why it found you. These words are not content. They are a hand reaching into the exact week of your life when the postponing was supposed to end. What you heard tonight, the voice of vocation, the buried gold in the shadow, the axis between the ego and the self, the counterfeit of inflation and the reality of the calling, all of it was one single message wearing different clothes, and the message is this: the certainty you have envied in others was never theirs alone, and it was never denied to you. It was waiting in your own depths for the day you would stop asking the world's permission to hear it. If these words touched something true in you, share them with one person who is living provisionally, one soul you love who has postponed themselves, because by passing this on, you become part of the summons in another person's life, and callings, like candles, lose nothing by lighting each other. And stay connected to this space, because this was not the last message meant for you. The next one is already forming, and it concerns what happens in the first 90 days after a person finally says yes to their calling, the tests that come, and why they come, and you will want to be found by it when it arrives. Before you go, type the single word certainty in the comments, as a seal on everything that opened in you tonight. The voice that called you here has been calling you your whole life. Tonight you finally turn toward it. Do not turn away again. You are called. You are capable. You are already becoming.